right. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel, and there's been a comedy of errors over at the Somi studio. So today we are in the Somi, what do you call it? In the Somi boardroom, right? So I hope everything works. I got almost everything set up here. Give me 1 second to get the show on the road. We're doing fiber optic cable laying over at the studio, and so somebody hit something, cut something, or whatever. So we had to repair over here to the boardroom in order to get the show cranking. So let me just check and see if we're online. And and then today of all days, my my keyboard decides to start acting up. So can you imagine that the J on my keyboard will not work, right? The J as in Jeet Kune, the K does not work. The N, the U and the N do not work. And I have to type Jeet Kune, right, as often as possible, right, as you guys well know. So it's interesting, a whole bunch of things that have been going on. But we're here, intrepid as ever, and this is the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast number 41, and this is the one about Jeet Kune, a style, a system, an art. 2 days ago, when I put the ad up for today's broadcast, I got a Facebook response from a guy, and he advised me that Jeet Kune was none of the three that I had used in the ad. It was neither a style, nor a system, nor an art. So you know me, right? I said to him, "Well, then, is there even a need for me to do this installment?" And he said, "Yes, of course there is. That was just something that had been told to him by his instructor, who had trained under the late Sifu Larry Hartzell, right?" So, of course, in actually, and what he said was that what Jeet Kune was a form of self-expression, a method of self-expression, right? Okay, so in posing the question, obviously it's rhetorical, right? And I could have also used the words science and philosophy, right? So, because at various times we have all heard different people use these different terms to describe this thing that's known as Jeet Kune, right? So you probably recall that right here on the broadcast, we have referred to places where I don't have any handouts that I can display for you, because everything's back at the studio, right? I rushed over here with just the laptop and the cameras, right? So, but we have referred to many places, many instances where you can find Bruce Lee using the word style to describe Jeet Kune, as in when he says, "I'm having my own style drawn up," right? So I think it's therefore safe to assume that at one point Bruce Lee did indeed look at Jeet Kune as a specific style, separate and distinct from other styles out there, right? It kind of sounds that way, don't you think? So someone who today still looks at Jeet Kune as a separate and distinct style might be, well, you know, they might have some backing for that, right? So because everybody has their opinion on it, right? So, but if in let's say it was 65, Bruce Lee talked about Jeet Kune as a style, right? Or talked about having his own style made up. And then later on, this thing that he had made up as so was named Jeet Kune. But then you have to recall that later on, let's say 1967 or so, I don't have the accurate date, so don't hold me to it. He says that he has lost faith in all systems, including the Chinese systems. So I think that can be considered evidence of a further evolution away from the idea of style, right? In almost every broadcast, I reference the what I call the 4 tenets sign, the Jeet Kune Do sign that hung at the Kali Academy. And we always talk about the 4 tenets. We always talk about research your own experience, absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. But here's the thing. Sometimes we never mention what's at the very top of that sign, and the words at the very top of that sign say, the truth in combat is different for each individual in this style. Now, I don't know what year that sign was painted and made up of what have you, but that sounds as if the word style was in use, was in reference at some era, right? I've told you before that that sign actually should be attributed to Dan Inosanto and not to Bruce Lee, right? And then there's I think this was 1974, a black belt article, Jeet Kune Do, it's fast, powerful, deceptive. And in this article, Sifu Dan says, it wasn't until, I have the quote here, it wasn't until I started learning Jeet Kune Do under Bruce Lee that I found a style that used all 3 important aspects of fighting. A style that was fast, powerful, and deceptive. So in saying that, what Sifu Dan was talking about, he had been drawing a comparison between American football, which he played, and martial arts. So he'd been talking about the position of running back, and that there were 3 kinds of runners, and that a good runner could have either speed, power, or deceptiveness. And he said that it was comparatively common to find runners using any combination of the two attributes, but only rarely would you find a runner that used all 3 attributes. And so he was relating that to his experience in martial arts, right? And he said that it was uncommon to find a school that would emphasize all 3 attributes, but it was only when he came across Bruce Lee that he had found a style that did that, right? So this is in the early to mid 1970s that the word style was being used. The word system, my definition of system in Jeet Kune Do essentially comes from my Sihing Cas Magda. So it was a conversation that we had. This would have been this was 1987, I think it was, right? And what Cass said was that essentially system is another one of those individualized aspects of Jeet Kune Do, right? How you put stuff together for your learning, for your teaching, right? For your training is essentially your system. So that's why you can find so much variation in the approaches that different Jeet Kune Do instructors use, right? So let's say, for example, we were talking about Tom Moss, who trained under one of Larry Hartzell's instructors. Well, the second that you mention the word Jeet Kune Do and the name Larry Hartzell, immediately everybody starts thinking about the grappling aspects of Jeet Kune Do, because that's something that Larry Hartzell was best known for, right? So that was a somewhat different approach. You might not think, essentially, if you hear the name Ted Wong when it's associated with Jeet Kune Do, you might not immediately start thinking of grappling at all, right? And so it's because of the way that these people organized their material, right? Whether for training, like I said, for teaching, or what have you. So that is the idea of system, right? So somebody might put grappling early on in their approach, but somebody else might say, well, no, for me, grappling requires the skillful manipulation of your opponent's center of gravity. So I want my people to have impeccable control over their own center of gravity before they start grappling. So I'm going to focus on kickboxing, on kicking and punching, because that's how they will develop this impeccable control over their own center of gravity. And then I'll introduce them, when they have that control, I'll introduce that to the idea of controlling others through trapping and grappling, right? So that's an idea of a system. Another approach to system, somebody might say, okay, well look, well-roundedness as a martial artist is important in, let's call it my Jeet Kune Do, for lack of a different expression, right? And so since well-roundedness, I want my people to be skilled, and I want to be skilled myself in empty hands and in weaponry. So I'm going to incorporate certain training from weapon systems. So that's where you might find somebody putting an emphasis on you know, Filipino Kali or some other kind of weapon system. So that's the idea of system. On page 9, starting on page 9 of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee talks about the idea of art and the artist and transcendence, essentially, right? So one quote that's found in there is, "The aim of art is to project an inner vision into the world, to state in aesthetic creation the deepest psychic and personal experiences of a human being," right? So dig this. I'll read it again, because when Bruce Lee starts waxing philosophical, right? That's when you really got to pay attention. So the aim of art is to project an inner vision into the world, to state in aesthetic creation the deepest psychic and personal experiences of the human being. So obviously what we're talking about there is something that goes way beyond just the mere physical expression, right? So even if it is a form of a method of self-expression, right? It's what you get from an artist who might be physically expressing something. What the viewers or the audience or what have you, what they get is not necessarily always on the physical level at all. It could be on the mental level, it could be on the emotional level, it could be on the psychological level. So I'll give you two more quotes out of the Tao, right? And like I said, if you look at old edition, page 9, that's where you can see some of this stuff. An artist's expression is his soul made apparent, his schooling as well as his cool being exhibited, right? An artist's expression is his soul made apparent, his schooling as well as his cool being exhibited. I like that one, right? And then the last one, this one's a little bit longer than the other two, right? Artistic skill, therefore, does not mean artistic perfection. It remains rather a continuing medium of reflection of some step in psychic development, the perfection of which is not to be found in shape and form, but must radiate from the human soul. Right, that one's too long for me to read again. But if you guys look it up, if you go over the video again, you'll grab what that's talking about. I think that we will all agree that when some people do what they do to such a high degree of, we recognize that we're in the presence of greatness, right? And we know that we're looking at an artist. So when we look at Bruce Lee, when we look at a Michael Jordan or a LeBron James or a Kobe Bryant or what have you, right? And then one of the things that happens with artists is that artists end up influencing people into following them, which is why to this day you'll still have, you know, I mean, look at all of us. In the Jeet Kune Do world, right? Still influenced by Bruce Lee's example of artistry, still having discussions and debates and dialogues about this thing that we call Jeet Kune Do. And then of course there's the aspect of people so impressed that it begs the question, you know, how would Bruce Lee do in modern day competition and what have you, right? Okay, so like I said at the beginning, in the title, I didn't use the word science or the word philosophy, right? But I could have, but you know, it was a rhetorical question. And those of you who have been, who spent time on the broadcast with me, you know that more often than not, I'll go a little bit deeper than what the title actually says. So even though I didn't include the word science, right? I want to address this point. Now, I know that Chris Kent, another one of my Sihings, is a huge proponent of the viewpoint that Jeet Kune Do is a science. In fact, in his interview in Jeet Kune Do Conversations, the Jose Fraguas book, this is what Chris says. Referring to Bruce Lee, his self-knowledge, training, and research allowed him to analyze techniques and quickly discern what was a useful or efficient motion and what wasn't. He looked at the roots of all forms of unarmed combat in their totality, seeing the common denominators that connected the best components of all styles. He analyzed various motions, techniques, and actions not from the viewpoint of style, but from science. Bruce reviewed unarmed combat as a science and investigated it as such. I think his phenomenal skill was the result of the application of research into the human sciences of motion, force production, fitness and conditioning, and going on and on and on. And then ultimately he re-quotes Bruce Lee when Bruce Lee says, if you understand motion, you don't need style, right? So if you get the ideas behind science, yeah, then you're not going to be talking about stylistic differences, right? You know, to me, science is a thing where you postulate a particular theory and then you go out and you conduct tests, you conduct experiments and research and what have you to determine what's true and what is not true, right? So if you know anything about the early days of Jeet Kune, then you know that that's exactly what they were doing. In I think it's called Aikido Journal, right? There's from 2 years ago, there's a interview with Jeff Imada. And Jeff says that in the early days, they were crazy because in the Jeet Kune class, they were experimenting and sparring full contact with weapons, and there was hardly any protective gear at that time for martial artists. So they would come in with, you know, a hodgepodge is what he says, of different things that we'd find. Some guys would come in with hockey gloves. Some guys would use the catcher's shin guard, right, from baseball, or the umpire's shin guard from baseball, right? Chest protectors, motorcycle headgear, and that kind of stuff, right? In the search for, he says that in the search for that which works, we can view Jeet Kune as a science. There's that word. One thing I feel compelled to point out is that because Jeet Kune is a personal experience, right, everyone must engage in the experimentation. So you cannot accept someone else's results, you know, as your theory. So all Jeet Kune practitioners, right, students, instructors, everybody, instructors have to continue to provide the experience for their students, and not relegate the training to, you know, the realm of, it's like, you can't say, okay, we know that this works because other people proved it, so we're just going to accept that. Yeah, that's okay up to a point. You got to go out there and prove it for yourself also. So everybody who's involved in Jeet Kune, doesn't matter what era, doesn't matter what generation you are, everybody has to take part in that analysis and research and development. Everybody has to take part in that experimentation, right? Okay, so last one, Jeet Kune as a philosophy. Well, I mean, I think everybody agrees on that. There's even, you know, one of my favorite books, The Art and Philosophy of Bruce Lee, right? A philosophy is for me, is a set of principles, theories, guidelines, that can be applied to your particular discipline, but then a true philosophy can be applied outside and beyond your particular discipline. So if we view Jeet Kune as the search for truth in martial art combat, right, then when we expand that, we can expand it out into the search for truth in all things. If we view the stop hit or the interception as the highest level of counter offense, and then you expand that idea of the stop hit into the realm of your own mental cultivation, then the idea of intercepting yourself, so intercepting those periods where you know you're wasting time, you know you're procrastinating instead of getting what has to be done, then you use the philosophy of Jeet Kune to intercept yourself and get off your butt and go do what has to be done, right? So instead of playing games or what have you, right? You guys get what I'm saying, right? Okay, so that's it for today. Just a brief look at Jeet Kune, an art, a style, a system, philosophy, science, or what have you, right? That's it for today. So as always, feel free to share. Like and comment, ask me questions. I'll go back through the comments and re-comment on anything. In about half an hour, come back and see me again, not on I Love Jeet Kune, but on my page at Dwight D. Woods, where we'll do Jeet Kune Dialogues episode number something, right? Today we'll be talking to Juan Perez out of Combatives Unlimited in Jacksonville. And then on Monday, we will be with Unlimited Martial Arts, Anthony Fontana. Right, I know it's Labor Day, it's probably a holiday for most of you guys, but I figure it's called Labor Day. Why the hell don't you do some work, right? Okay, so come back in about, let's see, 38 minutes at 3 p.m. Facebook.com/Dwight D. Woods, and we'll talk to, we'll dialogue with Juan Perez. And then on Monday at 3 p.m., I'll see you back here for another episode of the Jeet Kune Dialogues, right, with Anthony Fontana. Okay, that's it. And then next Wednesday, see you back here at 3 p.m. Hopefully, we'll be back in the studio. We'll have another edition of the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. That's it for now. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good holiday weekend. See you soon. Take care.